Hello, everybody. Uh, uh, I think for those who are already in, I already greeted you. For those who are just arriving, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're doing fine. We want to continue from where we left from last time. Yeah, I might have been a little bit in a rush, but not to worry. There'll be a lot of things we'll be looking at when we meet them actually. So if you missed the section on the CSS, just you can go through it. There is just so much about CSS. CSS in itself should have its own session because we didn't do a lot. But I think I left you to try something out. I don't know if you get time. I can try and do it here and see if probably I can write the code, or maybe I'm not really good at it. Yeah. So today we're supposed to be introducing JavaScript, looking at what exactly is JavaScript. If you're familiar with the other languages or other programming languages, yeah, this will be a breeze for you. If you're not yet familiar with you've used any other languages, maybe except HTML, CSS. Yeah, it might feel a little bit difficult, but not to worry. You just need to hang on a bit, understand a few things, and I think from there you can do quite well, because it's a very simple language. There are very few things to that are between you and being able to do something productive with it, with the language. And honestly, I think JavaScript is a very good language to start with at some point, but I think in a short while I'll be contradicting myself when it comes to that point. Yeah. So without wasting time, let us just start from my left. Let me share my screen. So I believe everyone can see my screen. If you can see my screen, just signal me so that I know it's working. Yeah. Okay, that's good. So to study JavaScript. As you can see, there are a lot of things to talk about, and the funny thing is that this is not even we've not even covered very complex things yet. I think this is enough for us to start. I have included some things that I didn't learn when I was learning JavaScript for the first time. The reason I did so is because people are asking about things like React. So there are a few things we're going to talk about here that may not be really the beginner part, but I will be signaling you so that you don't get pressured so much about them. But they'll be very important as you move forward. You'll be seeing them in your when you move to other frameworks like using React, Next.js, or Angular, anything else. I think it is very familiar syntax that we'll be looking at. So so let us introduce JavaScript. So JavaScript is one of the three core technologies of the web. Okay, that web developers must learn. So for you to be a good web developer, you must at least have some understanding of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Because as we said, HTML helps us to structure things on the web. Then CSS makes them look nice. And then JavaScript, it just adds functionalities. It enables the user to do things, okay? So long time ago, websites were just for displaying content. There was no interactivity. And then interactivity was added by using scripting languages like JavaScript. Yeah, JavaScript was chosen. It was created specifically to do things on the web. But you see, JavaScript developers are very passionate people. They have found a way of trying to do almost everything with JavaScript. Nowadays, people even do machine learning with JavaScript. So it is a very versatile language. I can almost say there's no way of escaping it. At some point in your developer career, you just have to write JavaScript, or read JavaScript, or maintain somebody else's JavaScript. So as much as you might think, okay, I'll just skip over this, but at some point you still need to come back to JavaScript, understand? Because the thing is, interactivity, if you want to perform interactivity, you want to make sure that your website is doing a lot of amazing stuff, users can click things and things happen, you actually need a scripting language. And it just so happens that JavaScript is the most supported. Most browsers can natively run JavaScript. So you would use something, if it was possible, you would use something like, let's say, Go. But now the problem is it does not natively run in most browsers. And the only way to make such other languages like Go and Rust to run on other browsers is by using, I don't know, something like WebAssembly, and you try and make it run, but it's not as good as JavaScript is. So what exactly is JavaScript? JavaScript is a versatile programming language that allows you to create dynamic and interactive web content on web pages. You know what? This is too. Let's do something. Let me show you something. Okay. So the last time I was here, I think I was a bit confused. I want to write something down.
Maybe are you sharing your screen?
Yeah, I think I'm sharing. Is it visible?
I
Can everybody
can't
see my screen? If you can see my
see
screen,
it.
just so that I understand
Maybe
them
someone else.
left out. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I was trying to create something here. I think I left it somewhere. So insert, I think drawing table. Yeah, a new one. So I want you to imagine that we have two things involved when it comes to programming. So we have two things involved when it comes to programming. Don't know how do we use this. Okay, that one definitely. So we have two things involved. Let me just call them two entities involved when it comes to programming. So number one, we have the human. Number two, we can just copy this one somewhere here to the screen. So number one, we have the human. Just place this on the right somewhere here. And number two, we have the machine, or what some people call the bare metal. Yeah. So programming falls somewhere in between. As programmers, what we are trying to do is that to help other people communicate to the machine. So basically, we are also trying to communicate to the machine. Programming falls somewhere in between the two of these. Now, we have so many different types of languages, at least the ones that I've met with so many languages at this point. Uh, you can say that every language that I've met so far in my short career that I've had always has something unique about it. But fundamentally, they can fall into two groups. These languages can either be somewhere here, very close to the machine, or a little bit close to the machine. We can say past the, I don't know, call this average, the average position, or I don't know. And then there are other languages that are very close to the human. What do I mean? We have a group of languages that are more machine-like. Like the code that we write are very are not very human readable, but the machine understands it very well. And then we have other languages where the human understands it very well, but the machine has to undergo a lot of processes to do that. So an example of, I don't know if this is a text, but yeah, okay, this one looks good. So here, for example, I can copy this, paste this one here. Yeah, Control Z. No, I don't want that one. Copy this text box, please. I'm having problems copying this. Okay, so I'll just move this one. I want to start with the other side because it is not part of what we are going to talk about. If I can just move this somewhere here. I don't know why this is misbehaving. So we have languages that are very close to the machine. Not very close, but languages like, I don't know, Java, Go. You can write such languages. And then we have languages that are even closer. Languages that are even closer to the machine. Examples of these languages are like C, and then we have something like C++. Yeah, and even more recent ones that have been created, like I think you can place here Zig, and I had somebody mention Rust the first time we were meeting. So we have like Rust, and then we have things like, I don't know, Carbon, the one created by Google. So languages can be grouped into two sections. There are some that are very close to the machine. Usually they are very difficult to run. They have a lot of complexity when it comes to writing them, because we are we are given a lot of control on how we want the machine to operate. The machine usually is able to really understand what we mean in these given languages. And then we have some other languages some other languages that are much more further from the machine, but they are very human readable. Example is JavaScript. Yeah, we have JavaScript, we have TypeScript. I've seen some people writing TypeScript. Yeah, you use that a lot. TypeScript. We have Ruby. Yeah, I've seen some people writing Ruby. I don't know, something else, Python. We have Python. So this is what we have. So we have some languages a bit further from the machine, like JavaScript, TypeScript, Ruby, and Python. And then we have some languages that are much more closer to the machine, like C, Zig, Rust, and Carbon, and some that are averagely in between, like Java and JavaScript, like Java and Go. So the funny thing is that JavaScript falls somewhere here, and JavaScript in itself, the syntax is very human-like. It is English-like. You can be able to read the statements and sometimes make out what they're supposed to be implementing, even without knowing, even without having referred anywhere in maybe on the documentation or on the internet or tutorials. Yeah. So some of the key features of JavaScript include interactivity, versatility, event-driven programming, and also its wide adoption. Yeah, what this means, event-driven programming. Let me explain this one because I think it's a bit vague. Event-driven programming is this is where we are just responding to given events. Events like clicks, those are what we call events. Clicks, typing. So JavaScript is built in such a way that fundamentally it is an event-driven programming language. So you can be able to respond to events like somebody clicked a button, somebody scrolled, somebody hovered over something. You can be able to do such things with JavaScript. So JavaScript is designed to respond to user action and events, making it perfect for creating a responsive and engaging user experience. Okay, like I've just said, JavaScript is widely adopted. I don't know if there's a field where we don't have JavaScript tools. If you go to AI, you will find JavaScript tools. If you go in even in Web3, we were using a TypeScript, which is just another layer on top of JavaScript. When you do things like ICP, I've seen some of you doing things with ICP. Yeah, you will still meet JavaScript in another form, probably, or packages that are written for it. So yeah, so that's basically it when it comes to an introduction of what JavaScript really is. So what are the examples of things you can do with JavaScript? These are just few examples here. We have a form validation. This is basically just ensuring that users provide a valid input when submitting a form. When you ask for a name, somebody does not give his phone number, things like those. They are very important. It is very easy to assume that this is a very small thing, but there are people who are specifically in charge for doing this in a given project or given organization, because it's a very huge task. Very difficult one, by the way. So sometimes you want users to input their passwords or things like that. You must have a way of validating. You see, if you don't validate data that the user is providing, some users who are very clever can put code on sections of your project that require an input. So like you create, I don't know, a text box, and you're not doing very good validation of the data being provided by the user. Somebody can actually place code there and try and manipulate things on the back end. You've heard of things like SQL injection, or if you've not heard of it, somebody basically feeding uh, raw SQL into your inputs and trying to manipulate data at the back. Yeah, and some years back that was a very big deal. Languages like PHP suffered a lot from this. Yeah, so you can do things like form validation, content update. You can update things dynamically without reloading the page. Yeah, with technologies like Ajax. Ajax in full is just synchronous JavaScript, yeah, and XML. Yeah, something like that, or something along like that. I don't remember it very well. So interactive maps, yeah, in the where I work, we've used this one actually. Yeah, it allows you to integrate and manipulate maps from services like Google and everything. Yeah, even games. JavaScript nowadays is used to make games. I actually made a game, I think a few years back, using JavaScript. It was a very terrible game, very badly written code. But yeah, it worked and it ran in the browser. I was using the Canva and the HTML to display everything. Yeah, it was good. So web applications, so develop full-fledged web application with frameworks like React, Angular, or Vue.js. Now, it is not mentioned here, but JavaScript can be used for both the backend and the frontend. So you can use JavaScript to create the front end of your application using something like React or Angular, and use in the backend something like Node. Yeah, so that Node and you can use Node with other things like Express to create your backend. Though I'm not a fan of that, actually, I prefer JavaScript to stay on the front end. Yeah, but that's a hill I'm willing to die on. We usually have a lot of arguments with JavaScript, with Node developers specifically about that. Yeah, but yeah, JavaScript is a very good language actually, very simple. So to start using JavaScript, you don't need any special software. You just need a text editor and a web browser. Here is a simple example of how to get started. Okay, so I think we can write this. I don't know what it's trying to do. Oh, okay, so there's a button now. So what you can do, just go to a browser. Today I opened my browser very early. So what you can do is that we can create a new folder. So if you're creating a new folder, yeah, we are still studying JavaScript under the bracket of web development. So forgive me if we have HTML and CSS files here. So we can call this JavaScript. We can call this probably lesson one. Lesson one. So this is our first lesson. So you can have in here a HTML file. Maybe you can say index.html, and then you can have a CSS file. So you can say index, I don't know, styles.css, and you can have the last styles.css, and then the last file as our JavaScript file. So it is I think we can call this script.js. Remember what I told you, the extensions matter a lot. You can actually call this index.js. It does not matter. What it will look at is the extension. So if you want it to be a JavaScript file, you need to have .js as your extension for the file, .css for the CSS file, and .html for your HTML file. So I know what we've been doing initially is writing everything under HTML, which is very rare. It is very rare to meet a very huge project where they have placed everything, including the CSS and the JavaScript in one page. Usually, what they do is split it into three, especially if you're only using pure JavaScript without any framework. So pure JavaScript, the way we are using it like this with no framework, people normally call it vanilla JS. So when I was starting to be a developer, I would use that term a lot because it sounded so big. So they ask you, what kind of JavaScript developer are you? What are you using? And I tell them I use vanilla JS. Vanilla JS just means that you're not using any framework. So as we said, if you want to write HTML, we just start with the shortcut HTML :5. Yeah, and it brings all the boilerplate that we need. So we can just run this to make sure that it runs. So we can just open that, open with the live server. Yeah, so it works. So it's a blank page. There is nothing here. We can change this part at the top. So it's called document. I think we can call this lesson one. And yeah, so remember what I told you, the head, there is a head section, there's a body section that is supposed to hold our content, and then we can always add a script section. So we have a script. So we have a script. So let's add C, and we can link this to I don't know. Our file is called script. Sorry about it. Sorry for that. Script.js. Yeah. So we have that there, and you can always link it. So basically, by adding this part, we are telling it that the source of our JavaScript is in a file called script.js. So this is just a path to that given JavaScript file you're referring to. To be sure that you placed it well, I used to do this while I was starting because I never knew how to write absolute parts and relative parts. So what I would do is just hold your control and click on that file and make sure that it opens the file that we have here. So just hold control, hover on top, it should form a line, and then just click that and make sure that it opens the same file that you're using. Okay. So this is where we are going to write our JavaScript, most of our JavaScript code. But because we want to place something on the screen, at least we have something we can work with. I think I can just place a H1 here, and maybe we can give it an ID yeah, I think title is good. Title. Then we can close that, and we can say that this is the title of the page. So we can have that, and then we can have a button that is maybe we can have a button so that we see. So we can place a button here, and you can just yeah, ID button. Maybe yeah, show my name. Maybe show name, something like that. So I want it to show my name when I click this button. So when you run this, what we expect to find in your page is a H1 and a button. Only those two things, and then the script tag will link this given HTML file to our JavaScript file. So when you go to the browser, yeah, as you can see, we have a button here, but this button does nothing. As you can see, if we click it, nothing happens. So this is exactly what happens when you don't have JavaScript. It is quite difficult to place functionalities here. So what JavaScript will enable us to do, as we want to do in a few seconds, is to add more functionality to our website. We want to be able to do something when we click the button, the click me button. So this button has an ID, and there is an attribute you can add to the button that is called on click. So when we click, you can just see it appears. So you don't even need to type it. You can just complete like that. And what we want to do is maybe say hello function. Maybe hello function. We want to call a function that is called hello. If you don't know what a function is, don't worry. We will be covering that in a short while. But I just want to be able to do something to show that, okay, this is how it works. This is it. It actually works. So this function called hello, we don't define it here in the HTML. We could, but I prefer that now because we've linked our HTML to our JavaScript file, we can just go to our JavaScript and define a function, and you can say this is called hello. And what it will do, it will just console log, not console log. That will appear on the. I don't want to inspect the page. I think you can just use alert. Yeah. So simple line of code. Basically, we are saying when somebody presses that button, give an alert, and the message in the alert should be hello world. Okay. So let us see if it works. We won't need our CSS file right now, but I just placed it there. So because we've been doing that for so long, so I just did it by default. So we have our button. So when we press it, we expect our functionality. As you can see, an alert is given. So the alert is saying hello world. So congratulations, you've just written your first line of JavaScript. So if you don't understand anything about the code that we've written right now, don't worry. We are about to cover that to understand what have we just done. As you can see, when we are describing JavaScript, we say that it is an event-driven. It can be used. It is an event. It can be an event-driven language whereby we are waiting for user to do some sort of action like clicking. For example, right now, when you just go to the site initially, nothing happens. You require the user to do things like clicking. So if a user clicks a button, is when our JavaScript gets the signal. Okay, now I can execute something. So yeah, that is one feature of JavaScript. It is very good at that. So JavaScript was built as a scripting language. It was just basically built to interact with the DOM. That was initially what it was built for. I think so. Yeah, but it has evolved ever since to become an even, yeah, an even more dense language with so many features and so many ways of doing things. It is almost insane. So I don't know if this code can run here. I don't want to press it. I forgot to remove the part for executing it. But yeah, so I didn't write this. It's a bit complex. We've not yet covered this, but in a short while, I will have to show you this because most of the code that we'll be writing will require this. As you can see, you can still use the script tags in your code, but place the code in between the two script tags. Or you can add your own click somewhere here and just do it the way, or you can add your SRC, the path to your JavaScript file on the SRC attribute, and then link, that will link your HTML to your JavaScript. Yeah, so that's basically it. So I personally, the language I enjoy writing most is usually Golang. It's quite unfortunate where I am currently working. I'm mainly writing TypeScript, but I would like to compare some of the things that we have in Go and some of the things that we have in JavaScript, because this is what makes JavaScript very interesting. Remember what I said, there are some languages that are very close to the machine, and then we have some that are very close to the human when it comes to readability and how strict it is. Because the computer it is only made to follow specific instructions. So languages that are closer to the machine requires you to be very specific, and you really need to understand what you're doing. Yeah. So things like out of bound memory when you're writing your C and you're using the how was it called, memory allocate, the malloc memory allocate, and then you have to be allocate when you finish. Yeah, we don't have any of those in JavaScript. In fact, JavaScript is a dynamic language. Yeah, I know so what this means, dynamically typed language, is that JavaScript does not JavaScript checks the type during runtime. So let me give you an example. I think there's a good example here. So I want you to look at this code. Yeah, you might not know how to write JavaScript, but look at this. So we're using the word let, and then we're giving, maybe like declaring a variable. Like here we are saying a student is equals to 80. Yeah, this is okay. This is not weird, actually. This is okay in any other language. But look at what happens here. Somewhere in the middle of your code, you decide, you know what? I think student marks should be somebody's name, and then you decide to say that student marks is equals to Ochieng. And you might wonder, is this allowed? Yeah, this is totally allowed in JavaScript. In fact, this is one of the things that causes so many bugs in JavaScript. So we started with something being holding a number, and then as we continue somewhere in the code, somebody said, you know what, let me just put a string in there, and then it places Ochieng. And then all of a sudden you're trying to multiply marks times, I don't know, times 100, and you're wondering, what happened? It is like trying to multiply Ochieng times 100. It is very weird. Yeah, it is very unfortunate that the typing is not very strict. But the funny thing is that this by itself gives programmers a lot of flexibility. People are able to do very extraordinary things. Dynamic languages basically allow programmers to explore a lot of things. Yeah, basically express their creativity in some sort of way. There is no strictness in how the language operate, or how the rules of the language are placed. The rules of the grammar of the language, which we normally call syntax. Okay, so type checking done at runtime, typing done at runtime. So syntax, the syntax is flexible and less strict. This is the problem. This is where I was telling you, I don't think JavaScript is a good language for beginners, because you don't really learn the best practices. You don't write bad code and then you shoot yourself on the foot. Okay, you do a lot, but in itself, it doesn't teach you how to check on types and know that, okay, this is an integer, this is not just an integer, this is an, I don't know, int 64, int 32, in languages that are even more strict. Or this is a character, this is a string. Basically, JavaScript just tells you, okay, we'll just continue with what you know. Okay, so it is flexible, less strict. I don't like this because it raises bad programmers. I usually prefer somebody at least once in a while try something a little bit more strict. Maybe C, Go. You can try Rust and see how strict it is, especially in Rust. I went to learn Rust. I ran away after a few weeks, but I'll be going back. Rust was quite difficult. I remember I met so many different types of strings. I was wondering, and the borrow checker, and Rust is just, when it comes to learning how to code, it will really teach you. It will teach you the hard way by giving a lot of well-detailed errors, if that makes sense. So the primary use case of JavaScript is basically client-side scripting for development. What this means is that just running JavaScript on your machine so that everything does not need to run on the back end. Remember when we were talking about the client and the server? Yeah, so sometimes we want to run some code on the server. Sometimes we want to run some code on your machine. We want to send you the code and then it runs on something. The thing I'm talking about you have is the browser. The browser allows you to run JavaScript that has been sent from somewhere on your machine. Yeah, but also used in server side with things like Node.js. Yeah, making this possible. So this is an example of code. I was just trying to show you that how this operates. So in JavaScript, this is how you declare things, and you can declare things with no type. You don't need to tell it that this is an age is going to be a number, it's going to be an integer, maybe a float. You don't need to tell it that a name is going to be a string. At the same time, you can give it a value like 80 and then decide in the middle of the way that, you know what, I'm not going to use an integer anymore, I'm going to use a string. And this is very much allowed. Now, in something like Go, the typing is a bit strict. The typing is a bit strict. You can't do all these shenanigans. You can't just declare things. You have to tell it the type. Yeah, I'll be lying by saying that, but we have things like type inference. But the thing is, in Go, you have to give the types. So the type checking is done at compile time. So uh, in JavaScript, we don't do any compilation. Every time your JavaScript code needs to be used, the machine will start executing it line by line by line by line. So that is what you expect when you use a language like JavaScript that is interpreted. But a language like Go, it will come here and take everything that we have here and convert it into zeros and ones. So every time you need to run it, all you just need to use is the zeros and ones. So you get some sort of a binary file. That is what we call a binary file that has just zeros and ones, code that is represented as zeros and one in a language that, in a form that the machine can easily understand. So the type checking is done at compile time, and it is more strict and formalized. And mainly the use case is on backend development, or what we call server-side development, and in concurrent programming. Yeah, very good language. So yeah, you can see that. So in Go, I placed this code here to show you something. In Go, if you declare student marks and you tell it is an integer, and you give it a value 80, and then all of a sudden you decide, you know what, student marks is now a name, it will give you an error. It will not even run. It will give you an error during compilation. It will tell you type mismatch. It will tell you student marks is supposed to be holding integers, or it is supposed to be holding that given data type that you specified while declaring it. So types are declared explicitly, and this is very common in languages like Java, and you have Rust. But other languages like Python, Ruby, you can get away with this. You can get away with declaring with initializing something as an integer and then using it somewhere as a string. And that is why most people that use these dynamic languages like Python, Ruby, JavaScript have to be very heavy on testing. When you write a program, when you write your backend with something like Python, you have to write a lot of tests, because when you come back to refactor the code, if you can't remember everything you wrote. So you write tests, unit tests, you have to make sure that your code behaves exactly the way you want it to behave and the way it used to behave. In a language like Go, yeah, we write tests, you can't escape tests, but at least you have some typing. You are very sure of the types. You are very sure that student marks will never be a string as long as the program had compiled. It will never turn into a string. Though there is type conversions, you can convert between types, but the variable itself, the way it was declared, it cannot change its type. So the type is attached to it at some point. Yeah. So these are some of the key declarations. So error detection, yeah, you can read more about that, and performance. So basically, languages that are more strict like Go, Rust, C are very performant. The reason why they are very performant is because the compiler has a lot of information about your code. It knows that student marks is going to be an integer. So it knows exactly the amount of memory to allocate to that place. But in JavaScript, you can imagine it is not sure if you will continue with this as an integer. It is not even sure what student age is going to be. So it has like a way of just allocating memory that will consider that will be able to occupy everything. So when you decide when it reaches this line and it finds out that okay, that was type number, and now it can allocate specific memory for that. But you can as you can see, that has taken a lot of time. Yeah, that has taken a lot of time, and those pile up when you have a large code base, and every time it has to try and determine the types while running also, that makes it a bit slow. But something like Go, once you've compiled, everything is almost, in fact, it is illegal to compare the performance in terms of speed of something like Go and JavaScript. Yeah, it is very unfair. It is a very unfair race when it comes to comparing Go and JavaScript. So those are some of the key differences. So a few things I thought I should throw somewhere at the beginning before we continue the code. Use meaningful variable names. Keep your code organized and comment your code when necessary. So this is how we write comments in JavaScript. As you can see, it is the same thing in Go, and it is also the same thing in many other languages. The two, I don't know if this is a front slash or a backslash. I think this is a front slash. The two front slash and then you place. This is what we call a comment. So this part will not be executed when running this code. It will only execute up to where the semicolon is. So it executes up to the semicolon, it goes to the next line, it executes up to the semicolon. So this part will not be included in the execution. As you can see, I used variable names that make sense. Don't use things like X. You come here and instead of writing student age, you write SA, or instead of student name, you write SN. Because it is not bad, you might remember what it does, but you should be writing code such that when you come, I don't know, 10 years later, you are able to understand it. Or when another developer who has no idea of what even you're trying to do is able to tell. So don't use bad names. Don't use X and Y. There are very few cases where we use single letters, and it is because it is a very common practice to do that. And we will look at that later when you're doing things like loops. But in real sense, don't worry about long names. By the way, personally, I don't have a problem with long names. I have seen somebody writing a very long name, but at least I can understand what that variable stores, what it holds. Here you can know very well, okay, this is a student marks. I didn't need to place a comment here to tell somebody that okay, this is student marks. Yeah, so that is best. Those are some of the best practices. Stay updated. Yeah, JavaScript, everything changes every time. Where I am currently doing where I'm currently working, we were just in the process of migrating to Next.js 14, and now all of a sudden I'm hearing news we have Next.js 15 coming very soon. So if you want to stay in JavaScript, you have to be very updated. Yeah, watch YouTube channels like for Theo and Primagen. Those guys are, yeah, they know, they usually talk about a lot of emerging issues as far as JavaScript and any other programming language is concerned. So JavaScript is consistently evolving. Keep up with the latest updates and best practices. Then practice regularly. Practice regularly. If there was some way I could teach you to be obsessed with just writing code, I would actually, because you can have a few years of experience with JavaScript, but you might as well just become better than me in a very short time by just practicing every day. Practice and practice and practice and write code and ask people on their opinion. Sometimes you get annoyed when people roast your code, but you just have to keep on practicing, show people your code, and yeah, it all will be well with you. So JavaScript is an essential skill for any web developer. It enhances the interactivity and functionality of web pages. It is a gateway to learning more advanced web development technologies. By mastering JavaScript, you open up numerous opportunities in web development and beyond. Additionally, Understanding the differences between dynamically typed languages like JavaScript and statically typed languages like Go can help you choose the right tool for your project. Don't get me wrong, I know I have really roasted JavaScript when it comes to the comparison here, but trust me, you want JavaScript in your front end. You don't want Go in your front end. You want JavaScript in your front end. That is what you want. I have worked with WebAssembly, and I don't want to annoy people doing Rust or Web3 guys, but trust me, you want JavaScript to run on your front end. It is one of the. It is not even one of the best. It is the goat. It is the goat of front end development. Very important language to master or to learn. Yeah. So let's go on the next thing. So variables in JavaScript. We've already seen these previously on the code that we wrote. So this is what we call a variable declaration. In programming, you have to declare things. You have to tell it, okay, we will use X somewhere. So just remember X. This is what I was telling you as bad code. Don't use letters, single letters like this, the way I used here. This is bad. You should give names that make sense. But I use this because I was just saying it's a short code. So let X, that is how you declare a variable. And then you can assign X to something. So this is what we call assignment. Now you're telling X, I want you to hold the value 100. Basically, on the first line, you're telling the language, okay, I want you to create a space in memory, and that space, I want to give it a name, X. On the second line, you're telling it, I want X to hold the value 100. More specifically, the number 100. Yeah. So that is basically what we have. So types of variables, we have numbers. Now, as you can see, when you're talking about Go, you had to specify explicitly that this is an integer, this is a string. In JavaScript, it is not that we don't have the types, but the types are inbuilt. They are more implicit in the language. You don't tell the language what the type is. The language is smart enough to figure out what it wants. And if you have used other languages, you notice that this is not the same thing. Like if you have used something like Java or C, you know that this will be an integer, and then this will be a float or a double, depending on the language you're writing and the specifications. So JavaScript will determine that this is a number. When it is running, it will determine, oh, that is a number. So when you're asked about types in JavaScript, yeah, you know that there's a number, there is string, but these are more implicit. So a number represent both integer and floating point numbers. Basically, floating point numbers are numbers which have decimals. So 19.99 is a floating point number. 42 is an integer. So in JavaScript, we do not differentiate them. We just allocate the same memory for both of them. So a number is for both an integer, and a floating point number. So a string is basically a sequence of characters. So if you have characters, you can even place a number somewhere in between here. It is still a string. How do you know if it is a string? You look at the quotation marks. Anything you place under a quotation mark is treated as a string. Okay, so this is a string, and it is holding a sentence that is saying hello world. So the whole of this is a string because it is enclosed in the quotation marks. Another thing, I don't think if it will be mentioned anywhere, you can notice that in JavaScript we have this trailing exclamation, trailing semicolons. They are not compulsory in the language. You don't have to place them actually, but it's just good practice to place them. My editor, when I was writing this part, was automatically placing them for me. But yeah, your code will be fine without them. But I think it is good practice just to place them there. I see this mostly with people who have come from other languages like C, the way I also came from Java previously. Yeah, I was used to writing the semicolon, and yeah, it works well. It just looks nice, allows you to be, yeah, at least if you're using both languages, Java and JavaScript regularly, these are some few things that you can keep constant among the two languages. At least you can remember. Then we have booleans. These are just true, just represent a logical entity with two values, either a true or a false. That's what a boolean is. So you can declare a variable and say let is active to be true. You can also declare it and say let is active to be false. Okay. Then we have null, represent the intentional absence of any object value. intentional. I don't know why I never placed this in bold. Intentional absence of any value. So you can declare a variable as null. Basically, it's not that you didn't know there was something there. You intentionally place it there by saying there is an absence of any object value. Yeah, you can use that. Undefined, a variable that has been declared but not yet assigned a value. We will see this while executing some of our code. So this is undefined. Then we have a symbol. Yeah, represent a unique identifier. Each symbol value is unique and immutable. So this one, I don't use it so many times. Yeah, it's not very common. Uh, as far as as far as my experience goes, I just place it there because I thought it will be good content. Big int is a just represent a very big integer. As you can see, we didn't explicitly specify to it, but you can still store it. So we have other non-primitive types like objects, arrays, functions, date, regular expressions or regex. I don't know if I should just brush on top of this, if I should just brush this off, or basically an object. As you can see, here at the top, we have something like price, and you're giving it a value like 19.99. Now imagine if you want to store a code for like, you want to store data for the price of, let's say, sugarcane. You would do this. You would say sugarcane price is equals to 19.99. If you want to store the name of somebody, you will say let string is equals to David. Now what happens if you want to store something that has more than one uh, field? Let me call them field. You want to store, for example, a student. You want to store both the student name and the student's height, or you want to store the students' marks in maths, the students' marks in English, the students' marks in I don't know, biology. What we use is usually objects, because objects allows us to define uh, types that have a small that have properties inside. Basically, a collection of properties. So you can have something like an object having within it something like a name and an age. Yeah, that is basically what an object is. We are going to look at this deeper when you are writing code, I think so. So this is an array. Array is basically a special type of object used in for storing ordered collection. Yeah, this part I think is it's a bit confusing. A special type of object. Yeah, it just has something to do with how weird JavaScript is, but they are not even supposed to be related. They're supposed to be two very separate things. So what happens in an array is that you store things in a particular order. Usually what you do, why we store them like this, is because you want to retrieve them in a particular order. Yeah. So this one is at, say, index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3. So you can always extract them in the order in which they were stored. Yeah. So function, I'm just brushing over these things because we will be talking about them in later sections. So we have functions, date, and regular expressions. Yeah, we will talk about those. So variable declaration keywords. So we have var to declare variables. We have let, we've seen it so many times in the code, and then we have const. So if I can just go to my browser here, if you wanted to do, if you wanted to hold something like a student name, you can say let a student name to be equals to something like maybe you don't have a value yet. Yeah, and then later on you can come and say student name is equals to John. This is one way of declaring the variable. If you want to declare, you can also declare the variable and initialize it at the same line by using something like a const. So you can say student name 1. You can't use the same variable name twice. So you can put it like as John, or the last part you can use var student name 2 and give it a value like John. Now these are three very similar things, but they are not the same. They are very different on how we use them. Let is used when you are planning to change the content that it holds. Like for example, if you uh, declaring a variable, something that can change, we usually use let. Yeah, so we have something like a student, you can declare it without initializing it. So let allows you to declare something without initializing it, and then later on you can now initialize it and say, okay, now I want student to store John. Const is also very similar, but now the problem is you have to assign a value when you declare it. So when you say const student is equals to John. Now, if you're coming from another language, something like Java, something like Go, the const in JavaScript is not the same as the one in those other languages. What happens is that in JavaScript, the memory location is permanent. When you use the word const, basically the memory location that is storing the student name is permanent, but the value inside can change. So you are not allowed to do something like, you cannot come here and say student one. You cannot come and say student one is equals to Jane. This is an error. It's only that my browser is not. You are not allowed to reassign. This is supposed to give you an error when you run it, or when you try to console log it. It will give you an error. Maybe I can try and run it here because I have Node installed. You can see what really happened. Let us try and console log this. So you can say Node script script.js. There is an error that is getting there. What it is telling you is that assignment to constant variable. So when you use a const in JavaScript, what you're saying is that we have a value called John. We want to store it in a memory location that we've given a name, student name one. We are never going to reassign that given variable. So the memory location is permanent, but the content inside can change. And this is very common when you're using objects and when you're using array. You can still push things into that given memory location. You can still pop things out of that given, if it is an array, but you cannot do this. You cannot reassign things. As you can see, let usually makes this possible. You can declare something, as you can say, maybe let student, and then somewhere in your code now you say, okay, now we know what student is, and you give it a value, John. But this is not allowed when you're using const. You cannot reassign the value to something new. By default, that memory location that was given to the student name is permanent, but the content inside can actually change. We will see where I will be. I will show you an instance where this is well displayed when we are talking about arrays. Yeah, so this is something very confusing. Now, this var, please don't use it on your code. I don't want to say it is deprecated, but this is no longer used. By itself, it has a lot of it brings a lot of confusion in the code. There's a lot of unpredictable things that happens when you use var. We don't usually use this, but don't be surprised when you meet it in a code base somewhere. That is, it should not surprise you, but we usually don't use this. Basically, what happens when it comes to var? I think it is the first one. I place at the first one. Function scoped language. So if you have something like var x is equals to 5, you know, the behavior that I expected from writing other languages is that when you run this, you should get an error because you're talking about x and you've not yet declared it. But var makes it such that the function is still accessible by something that is above, that is above its declaration. It basically does this. I think I'm not yet sure. I'm not very sure. But what it does, it brings this the variable x the way it is somewhere at the top. So we have x existing somewhere here at the top before it is used. So by the time you're running, it is telling you it is undefined because it recognizes that there is a variable called x, but it has not been given a value yet. And then once you've already run it, is when you get the value to be 5. Ignore this last undefined. It is an error actually. It is not supposed to be displayed. But the first one you should get undefined, and the second one you should get the 5 now, because now we've declared it and we are trying to log it. Console log just logs the given thing you place inside the curly bracket, the given arguments you give it. So if you give it like a string, if you say I want to console log, let's say David, that is what it displays somewhere here. But now in this case, we are giving it X. So we are giving it X. So it is displaying X. That is what we expect the output to be. And this is what we expect here to be undefined. Please don't use this. In fact, I should have just removed it from the note, because this is not what it is worth learning in terms of curiosity, but never use this on your code. This is bad. Though it is even difficult for me to explain, because sometimes it does very weird things that even I do not understand. By default, by default, just use const everywhere you can. Just use const almost everywhere you can. And once in a while, when you feel it is very necessary, use the let. Basically, just operate between the two of those. Use either let or const. Okay. So let basically so variable declared with let are hoisted but not initialized. Accessing them before the declaration results into a reference error. So you cannot access something that you've not declared. It's like you're trying to access something. Code starts from the code is executed top down, especially here in JavaScript. So it comes here, it checks, okay, this is a function declaration. The first line, okay, it's trying to log out X, and then it asks itself, what is X? I mean, you've not even told us what X is. So that is where you get this error, reference error. X is not defined. As you can see, even the error is appearing here. So yeah, so that's basically it when it comes to let. So let allows you to reassign things. You can say X, you can start with X is equals to 5, and then somewhere in the middle, you can still come and say that X is equals to something like, I don't know, 10. Yeah, so that is what let lets you do. Yeah, sorry for the pun. Okay. So const variable declared with const are hoisted but not initialized. Accessing them before the declaration results in reference error. Yeah, so we have a reference error. Those are the small differences. Yeah, when it comes to const, let, and var. But please don't use var in your code. Yeah, I'll advise against doing that. But if you want to explore and find out, yeah, be my guest. You can still go and try.